everyone, my name is Alisa Tilsner and I'm a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator down in South Australia. Now I posted this card on my blog for the Stampin' Creative blog hop, and it has generated a lot of interest about the colouring, so I thought I would whip up a video. I'm not going to say a quick video because I don't think it will be, but I thought I would whip up a video to show you exactly how I've coloured this. Now it did take me some time to colour, and I will probably speed up some areas of the video and just stop to explain what I'm doing for each colour. I did take my time on this colouring, so it won't be, it'll be something that you need to set some time aside for. So I'm just going to explain the card to start with. So I worked on a base of Seaside Spray. Just make sure I've got my names right, Seaside Spray, and then I did a layer of the Subtles embossing folder, and I've worked on the fluid watercolour paper, and then I just popped a strip of Rococo Rose down the side. So it's a very, very simple card. There's nothing flash about the layering or the sketch or anything like that. It was just something that came together very quickly after I'd coloured it in, of course. So the two stamp sets that I'm using was the Happy Birthday to You, which is a Bration level 1 stamp set. So if you're in Australia and you're wanting to grab this, you just need to place a $90 order in the online store, and this one could be yours for free. So I think it's probably my favourite one from the offerings this year. I absolutely loved that cake. And I've also used, instead of using the Happy Birthday from that stamp set, I've used the Label Me Bold, the Happy Birthday one here, just to, because I wanted the cake to be the focal image, and I find that these smaller ones just really set off the focal image. It doesn't interfere with it, and I can tell that one's going to be a really good favourite one of mine. So let's get started. I'm going to just pop these aside because I don't need them. Now I did mention that I'm working on the fluid watercolour paper, and I have white embossed that. You probably can't see that, so I'll just bring it up. So working on the white did, you'll notice that I have to tilt my paper up a fair bit during the colouring so that I can actually see where I'm colouring. And the colours are pretty simple. I haven't used a whole stack of colours. I've used Seaside Spray for the cake, Rococo Rose for the flowers, Old Olive for the leaves, a little bit of crushed curry for the centres of the flowers, and then Smoky Slate for the cake stand, because I was at a loss. I'd finished colouring the cake and I was like, oh, I don't know what colour to colour next, but the Smoky Slate didn't take away from the cake because we wanted the cake to be something special. So I'm just going to squeeze my ink pad to get my colour. I have the muscles doing these ones. There we go. So I've got a nice bit of colour. I've got my aqua painter and my trusty paper toweling. I'm just going to smooch in a little bit, see if we can do that. Now, I tend to have kept my brush fairly dry for this one, my aqua painter, and I don't often have my barrel completely full as well, because I find that the pressure of the water, I'm going to have a dry throat. The pressure of the water comes down and sometimes makes the brush flood a little bit. So keeping it fairly dry, and I'm just going to start. I'm going to keep checking to make sure that I'm in screen as well. So I just started with the cake a little bit, and I just started off quite lightly and just sort of started at the edges, and with a little bit of a flicking motion. Actually, I might need my brush a little bit wetter than that. With a bit of a flicking motion, just push it in towards the middle. Now I have found, that's a bit better, a little bit lighter. The first one was a little bit heavy-handed. I have found that these new in-colour inks tend to react a little bit differently with the water. I'm not sure why that is, but That's just the way it is. Like, you can even see in my thing here how it's reacting a little bit differently where I've put a little bit of water down. And the other bit of the cake, so you can see it is quite tricky to, and that's why I've sort of started with the cake a little bit first, just so I could see where I was going. And I came back afterwards and added a bit more detail to the cake afterwards, but I just needed to see where I was. So there's a bit of cake in there. And I also had the actual image beside me too, so I could see where I was going. So just under there a little bit. So I just laid that down first, and I will come back and finish that off a little bit later. So next I started with the Old Olive. Just give your ink pads a bit of a squeeze. Now I do find, I've dripped Old Olive in there from something else I was doing. Okay, now this one I will speed up after, because I'm going to colour in the whole image, so I will speed up between. But just to get the general, make sure I'm in the right spot. So I'm just picking up a bit of the colour, and I find that the Old Olive, I don't know whether it's because I'm using an old ink pad or whether it's just Old Olive in general, but it seems to have a bit more of a browner undertone when it dries. So all I did was put down a little bit of concentrated colour in the leaves and wiped my brush off, and then just pushed out the rest of the colour. Okay. So I'll see if I can, let me just see if I can zoom in just a wee bit more so you can see one, and then I'll zoom off. So a little bit of dark colour, wipe your brush off, and then blend, come back in and blend that out. And that's how I did them. So I'm going to fast forward these little bits now, and pull back a little bit, and I'll show you how I do the next bit afterwards. Okay, now I have done all of my leaves. At least I think I've got them all. Pretty sure. So you can see I just went over the bigger ones a second time just to deepen them up a little bit more. So the next colour down is the Rococo Rose, and it's pretty much the same technique the whole way. Now again, this one's one of those new in colours, so I found that it reacted a little bit differently again, but it turned out in my favour because I got that really deep centre of the rose, and it spread out nicely. So let's just take a quick look at some of the petals, and this one I definitely did have to turn my paper up and down a little bit so I could see where I was going. But again, just popping the deep in the centre, and it tends to not want to spread too much, doesn't like the water so much, so which ended up helping me because I wanted it like dark in the centre and light on the outside, which is exactly what it ended up giving me. If I was working in bigger areas, I don't think it would have looked so great, but because each petal is fairly tiny, it worked out quite well. Okay, so that's pretty much how we do. It doesn't look great when it's really close up, but from a distance it looks okay. So I'm just going to go through and do all of them, and also the little so you can see how it just tends not to react. You probably can't. I can notice, but anyway, it didn't quite do what I wanted it to do, but it's okay. It turned out in the end. So let's zoom ahead again, and you can watch it in high speed while I try and work out where my petals are. Okay, now my brush has gotten quite dry actually, which made some of that blending a little bit difficult. So what I do at the end is just make it a little bit wetter and just come in areas that look a little bit odd or don't look like they've blended quite nicely, like this little petal here is quite thick down there. So I'll just come back and just dab or around an area there that I think should be a little bit darker. It's not too bad. I don't mind that sort of look. You know, depending on what sort of image you're colouring, some of it quite lends to not being a nicely blended image, if you know what I mean. I think this is one of them. I don't think you can really go wrong with it. So I think I've got everything. So now I'm going to make sure that my brush is clean, and I'm going to come back in with my Seaside spray and play with the cake a little bit more. So I will pick up a fair bit of water and make sure it's reasonably, well, not hugely wet, but a reasonable amount. And then I'll just start around the outside and just sort of flick that colour in again. And in between, now that I can see where the rest of the cake is, I can go underneath some of those petals and flowers and leaves, but just I just swing it around and work from the other side then. This is the top of the cake, so it would probably be like that, a little bit darker so that we can see the difference. And of course, every time you colour it, it's a little bit different to the time you coloured it before. It's just the way it goes. Now, in here you can see there's, you just want a little bit of the Seaside spray. And my brush is starting to split a little bit because it got quite dry. Okay, and then I think I'll come from this side first, just because it's bolder. And then I can get in there a little bit, now that I can see that there's some cake in there as well. We want the top to be a little bit darker. Try not to get your fingers, be mindful of where that little finger is going. And then I can just do some light dabbing around. But I want to try and keep that flicking motion going because that will carry on through the entire cake. So that's probably a little bit darker than my original. I'll bring in my original one after. Mind you, the colours do need to settle in a little bit. So, but you can fiddle backwards and forwards. I'm quite liking how that's turned out. And then, so I sat here the other day and I was like, oh gosh, I don't know what colour to do my cake stand now without taking away from the, oh, if I can get my ink pad open. So I thought smoky slate would be perfect. So I'm just going to try and get control of my brush back. And it was pretty much the same, just start off really lightly and just flick in from both sides, which doesn't look like a whole lot of ink going down at the moment. But you just keep building that up until you get how you want it. I think I did quite a few layers getting this up. One more, I think, just a little bit. And the great thing is because it is watercolor paper, you can just keep going back and adding more color to it if you want. Like if this is fairly light, I think my first one was even lighter than this, but you know, if you want it deeper in color, then you just keep going back and adding more. So there's not really any right or wrong. So that is my coloured image. It has taken me, my video at the moment is half an hour, but it won't be for you because I'll have sped it up. But, oh wait, it's not finished. I need to do my flower centres because this is only a 2-second job. I'll forget. You just pop that down and you don't need to be fussy with this one. I'm not even actually sure where the colour is, so I'll just pop it over everything and it'll stick to where the embossing isn't. There we go. Now I'm done. On my Facebook page the other day, I took a photo because I wasn't sure whether I wanted to do a yellow wash behind the background, like behind just a pale yellow wash behind just to see if it would pop my thing out a little bit more, but everybody, I think there was quite a few comments and the majority ruled and said just leave it as it is. So that is me colouring today, and I did rush through it a little bit. I probably would have taken a little bit more time, and that was my first go. So you can see every time you're going to colour it, it's going to be different, but I'm sure that whoever is receiving the card is going to love it anyway. So, but just have a practice. You can't go too wrong. I did have a little struggle with my aqua painter today. It didn't, I think it might have been a little bit too dry. I should have had a little bit more water, but that's pretty much how I colour it in. So not too difficult. And then I just finished off my card with a couple of the clear sequins from the new Poppies sequins pack. So I hope you enjoyed my video. If you did and you want to subscribe, I think I'm going to do a few more colouring tutorials along the way. And so it's always great to, you can colour along with me if you need to. So thank you very much, and we'll see you again another time. Bye.